Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Mike Pompeo confirmed that his efforts to get to the bottom of the COVID-19 origin was met with sustained opposition deep within the State Department. Renewed interest in the lab leak theory has put the two biggest fact-checkers into question. Democrat Senator Kyrsten Sinema has reaffirmed her support for the filibuster, calling it a tool that protects the democracy of our nation. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. The Bureau of Labor Statistics revealed an anomaly in recent data. Even though millions of Americans still remain on unemployment rolls or out of the workforce, the hourly pay rate soared twice as fast as expected in the first quarter. After adjusting for inflation, pay per hour went up 3.3%. While pay rose, the same didn't hold true for output. Businesses' output remained unchanged. While typically, a rise in compensation is a good sign for workers, it also adds to inflation pressure, particularly when compensation outpaces the output of businesses as it's happening now. The Bureau's data will likely add to fears that inflation is running hotter than expected. That's not a good sign. In May, the U.S. economy added 559,000 jobs, falling short by 15% of analysts' forecasts. It appears hiring is still being held back by the federal unemployment benefits. At the same time, Biden and Republican negotiators are making a final push for common ground to fund his infrastructure proposal. Republicans have balked at an increase in the corporate tax rate and counteroffered a $928 billion infrastructure bill. As an effort to bridge the gap, Biden is now considering imposing a minimum 15% corporate tax rate instead of a tax hike for his scaled-back $1.7 trillion American Jobs Plan. This minimum rate requirement would force companies like Amazon that currently pay little to nothing in federal taxes to pay. While Democrats and Republicans are having a hard time to knock down the infrastructure proposal, their views on the controversial figure, Dr. Anthony Fauci, are drastically different too. Will it continue to be the case with the thousands of pages of Fauci's emails that have been released? Top Republican lawmakers are now demanding the unredacted communications from Fauci and calling on him to testify before Congress about the origins of the pandemic. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise and House Oversight Committee ranking member James Comer wrote a letter on Tuesday to top committee Democrats. The letter said, "It is now imperative that Dr. Fauci come before our committees to provide information related to the origins of the novel coronavirus, as well as the U.S. government's role in funding research that may have contributed to the development of the novel coronavirus." Republican Senator Rand Paul is also calling for Fauci to come back to the Capitol to testify. Paul pointed out many of Fauci's emails contradict statements he gave to Congress in his previous testimony. In an interview yesterday with CNN, Fauci claimed the email from EcoHealth Alliance President Peter Daszak thanking him for publicly pushing back the virus leak theory was rather misinterpreted by the public. In the interview, Fauci, however, backtracked again on his views regarding the virus origins. Fauci asserted he keeps an absolute open mind and it could have been a lab leak. Further proof that Fauci is absolutely not to be trusted. On March 5, 2020, he recommended canceling religious services due to the pandemic, and just 4 days later, he approved campaign rallies and cruise ships. It's no surprise that a person who lies like Fauci is against religious services. According to the emails, Fauci was informed with far more evidence supporting the lab leak theory as opposed to a natural evolution. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a coronavirus authority himself, said people like Fauci actually did not have the information to say it was natural. Speculation now says even the Biden administration is actively looking to dump the doctor. Jack Posobiec from OAN said on Wednesday, White House staff are actively discussing an exit strategy for Dr. Anthony Fauci following the release of his emails. Breitbart's political editor Matt Boyle said before the release of the emails that he wouldn't be surprised if the Democrats would sacrifice Fauci to save their credibility on the issue of the origins of the coronavirus. But Fauci himself alone couldn't shut down the lab leak theory completely. On June 3rd, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo confirmed to the Epoch Times that his efforts to get to the bottom of how the coronavirus spread from China was met with sustained opposition within the State Department. Vanity Fair published an article titled "The Lab Leak Theory: Inside the Fight to Uncover COVID-19's Origins." The magazine expended great effort in finding what was going on with the State Department's investigation of the virus origins. After talking to more than 40 people and reviewing hundreds of pages of government documents, Vanity Fair found that conflicts of interest hampered the investigation at every step. The article said, in one State Department meeting, officials seeking to demand transparency from the Chinese government said they were explicitly told by colleagues not to explore the Wuhan Institute of Virology's gain-of-function research because it would bring unwelcome attention to U.S. government funding it. In an internal memo, a former State Department official said staff from two bureaus warned their leaders that continuing the virus origin probe would open up a can of worms. In March 2020, after former CDC Director Robert Redfield told CNN that he believed the virus had originated in a lab, he received death threats. He had expected the threats from politicians, but to his astonishment, he received them from fellow scientists. When Pompeo was asked about how Vanity Fair reported that officials deep within the State Department sought to keep the public from knowing the U.S. was funding gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab, he described it as a contentious battle. After the November 2020 election, Pompeo pushed within the State Department and the Trump administration for public release of as much evidence as possible. Finally, on January 15th, he issued a fact sheet on the activity at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Getting that statement out itself was a struggle, but Pompeo was able to disclose that several researchers inside the Wuhan lab became sick in the fall of 2019 with symptoms consistent with COVID-19. The former Secretary of State believes that it's important for Americans to know all the facts. A former senior State Department official with direct knowledge of the effort told the Epoch Times that the investigation led by Pompeo was to pursue the truth. He recalled Pompeo's directives was, "I don't care what conclusion you guys dig out. It may be something we like to hear politically or something we don't like to hear, but I want the truth." We hope this would be the attitude for all federal investigations. In addition to resistance deep within the government, the so-called fact-checkers made sure that the suppression of the lab leak theory was successful. However, after a handful of prominent figures came out acknowledging the possibility that the virus may have escaped from the Wuhan lab, these fact-checkers now find themselves in an embarrassing position. Real Click Politics recently issued a report hammering PolitiFact and factcheck.org for their prior dishonest analysis surrounding the origins of the virus. In April 2020, Chinese virologist Li Mengyan fled from Hong Kong to the United States. In September, Yan was invited on Tucker Carlson Tonight and told a version of the lab theory.
Give us, for a non-scientific audience, a summary of why you believe this virus came from a lab in Wuhan, please.
Okay, briefly, from my first report, I can present the solid scientific evidence to our audience that this virus, COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus, actually is not from nature. It is a man-made virus created in the lab based on the China military discovered and owned the very unique bat coronavirus, which cannot affect people, but after the modification, becomes a very harmful virus at now.
So Yan described the Wuhan lab was using gain-of-function to make bat coronaviruses transmissible to humans. Her claim apparently infuriated the science community and the fact-checkers. On September 16th, PolitiFact's Daniel Fouquet described Yan's statement as a debunked conspiracy theory that dissented from the consensus of the scientific community and international public health organizations. In the end, PolitiFact slapped a pants-on-fire rating on Yan's statement. Factcheck.org quickly followed suit the day after Angelo Ficera from factcheck.org published a similar piece titled "Report Resurrects Baseless Claim That Coronavirus Was Bioengineered." Ficera described Yan's research paper as faulty and dismissed her, quote, unsubstantiated claim on the virus origins. Both PolitiFact and factcheck.org had to correct their past statements in May and said the lab leak theory could not be ruled out. PolitiFact went even further in removing its previous fact-check piece from the site and posted an explainer that detailed the state of the debate over the virus's origins. But what were the fact checkers doing before May? It turns out what the mainstream media repeatedly cited as scientific consensus is from two scientific groups' statements. One from The Lancet and another one from Nature by Dr. Christian Andersen. The Lancet statement, which denounced the lab leak theory, declared it had no competing interest, but it was actually riddled with undisclosed conflicts of interest. One of the authors was EcoHealth Alliance's president, Peter Daszak. The statement was organized and drafted by him. Now, I want to remind everyone that Daszak sent millions of dollars to Wuhan Institute of Virology. So it's back to the Wuhan lab again. Of course, neither PolitiFact nor FactCheck.org mentioned Daszak's connection to the Wuhan Institute. You now know the fact-checkers' role in the whole virus origin saga. They help the media, the corrupt scientists, and doctors cover up their lies. Now, before we continue, if you like our program, please hit that like button and subscribe. It'll force the algorithm to share this video to potentially thousands of people. If you want to support the eye-opener, please consider donating to the show or purchase a mug that matters. You can find the link in the description below. Your support is greatly appreciated. Salute. Democrat Senator Kyrsten Sinema affirmed on June 2nd that she's standing strong on the filibuster. Sinema said the filibuster is, quote, a tool that protects the democracy of our nation rather than allowing our country to ricochet wildly every 2 to 4 years back and forth between parties. Sinema argues the existence of the filibuster encourages senators to find bipartisanship. For those who don't believe bipartisanship is possible, Sinema said herself is a daily living example that it is possible. She told reporters that she was just with GOP Senator John Cornyn from Texas at an event. There has been an outcry from the mainstream media, and Sinema's Democrat colleagues, including Joe Biden himself, has been pressuring her and Joe Manchin to drop their support of the filibuster. They complain Biden can't accomplish his agenda if Republicans keep blocking his legislative priorities. This is what Sinema had to say about that.
And I would think that most would agree that the Senate's not a particularly well-oiled machine, right? The way to fix that is to change your behavior. Not to eliminate the rules or change the rules, but to change your behavior. So I'm going to continue to go to work every day, aggressively seeking bipartisanship in a cheerful and happy warrior way, as I always do, and showing that when we work together, we can get things done. And when you think about our founding fathers, when they created the Senate with 2 senators from every state, regardless of population size, with elections staggered every 6 years so that only a third of the body is up for election each cycle. It was designed to be a place where you cooled the passions of the House, where you work together to find a compromise, and importantly, where you protect the rights of the minority from the majority, regardless of which party is in the majority at the time.
While Manchin and Sinema strongly defend the Senate rule, the pressure is also on the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's shoulders. Yesterday, a coalition of over 100 progressive groups sent a letter to Schumer in the wake of the Republicans blocking a bill to create the January 6th commission. The letter reads, "It is clearer than ever that the filibuster needs to be eliminated." However, to change or get rid of the legislative filibuster, Schumer needs total unity among his 50-member caucus. With 2 Democrat senators' unwavering support for the filibuster, the progressive effort is projected to end in vain. There's one important Trump-era policy that Biden hasn't reversed. Instead, he's expanded it. On June 3rd, Biden signed an executive order amending a ban from the previous administration that prohibits U.S. investors from investing in Chinese military companies. The new order expanded the prohibition list to 59 entities. It blacklisted more Chinese firms involved in the development or use of Chinese surveillance technology to facilitate repression or serious human rights abuse. Currently blacklisted companies include telecom equipment maker Huawei, surveillance manufacturer Hikvision, and 2 of the biggest state-run mobile operators, China Mobile and China Telecom. The American Securities Commission supported Biden's move to continue the previous administration's crackdown on the CCP's infiltration of U.S. capital markets. For decades, the communist regime has taken advantage of regulatory loopholes, using American dollars to fund its military development, re-education, and forced labor camps, as well as its role as the world's leading polluter. However, the order moved the authority of selecting targeted companies from the Defense Department to the Treasury Department. The White House fact sheet says the selection will be determined by the Treasury Secretary in the consultation with the Secretary of State. and if deemed appropriate, the defense secretary. Senator Marco Rubio raised concerns about the shift in authority. He said, while the administration's updated the Trump-era policy in important ways, I am very concerned that President Biden's Treasury Department is too closely aligned with Wall Street to take the actions necessary to prevent American savings from being used to fund the Chinese Communist Party. Rubio noted that Wall Street has been helping to finance the CCP's efforts to weaken and ultimately replace American leadership. Beijing and Wall Street's intimate relationship is not a secret. If you remember the insider video that went viral last December, a Chinese academic with links to the CCP touted on TV how Beijing in the last 40 years used the core power in Washington and Wall Street to influence U.S.-China policies.
这个30年啊，过去40年，我们在美国的它的这个利用它全是核心圈，是不是？我前面讲过，华尔街在1970年代开始对美国它的内政外交有非常强的影响力，啊，所以我们有路径依赖，是吧？但问题是，08年之后，华尔街的地位下降了，更重要的是16年之后，华尔街搞不定特朗普。 为什么？很尴尬。特朗普以前对华尔街有过一次软性违约，所以双方有矛盾啊。当然，这个细节我就不多说了，时间可能已经来不及了，是吧？那么，这个中美贸易战过程中，他们也试图帮忙啊。据我所知，美方的朋友跟我讲，这个试图帮忙，但是啊，力有不逮啊。但现在呢，现在我们看到拜登上台了。
However, to Beijing's dismay, its years of carefully and strategically planned global propaganda largely failed, with its crimes against Uyghurs, religious groups, Hong Kong pro-democracy protesters, and its cover-up of the coronavirus outbreak exposed. The CCP is so unwelcome that no administration can afford to be seen close to it. And that's it for today, my friends. Check out this playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can join me on the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on Newmaker, Gab, and Parler. Don't forget, please sign up to the email list so that we can stay in contact with each other. I'd like to thank you all, and I'll see you next time.